Hello, everybody. Welcome to Loud Thoughts with Seaman and Chance. This is episode 1. We're joined by Mr. Dan Mancini himself, the legend with the beard. Today's topics are going to be lots of random, varied things. The entire point of this podcast is just going to be the ability to learn stuff from a broad dynamic of different topics, some serious, some not serious, and just the ability to have conversations with people from all different dynamics of life.
Yes, and also learning that, two people can have two different opinions and still be really good friends. Because it seems like that's an issue a lot lately.
Yeah, and that's where Danny and I decided to do this, because we have very vast opposing points of view on a large array of topics, and we still maintain a very good friendship. So, with that being said, Mr. Mancini?
They just told me I could come and drink bourbon, so that's why I'm here.
So
Speaking of which,
we're gonna start off, not sponsored by
but if you want to,
Penelope, very good dry bourbon. Rocks?
absolutely not.
Oh, come on.
Absolutely not.
Oh, I'm not gonna be a fan. Mancini,
Yes,
if you'd
sir.
be so kind as to introduce yourself and your...
Jesus.
Yep, well, whatever.
Kevin's like, let's get messed up.
Yeah. Introduce yourself, let
Sure.
the people know what you do for a living.
Sure. Kevin was kind enough to introduce. My name is Dan Mancini. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm licensed in the state of New York, so technically, by their terms, I'm an LMHC. As far as the background goes, I have a couple master's degrees from Columbia University. I've been in private practice since 2013. And again, kind of work with a wide array. It kind of makes sense given the topic of conversation or the preview that you were saying before about wide arrays of conversation, wide arrays of thoughts and opinions. I work with a lot of different people who go through similar things, but from all sorts of different backgrounds. So,
Do you specifically have like a
like a niche.
like that you?
I did when I started. I think most people do when you start.
Yeah.
So when I first started, it was more neuropsychology than psychology or
Okay.
psychotherapy. So I would work with folks with like traumatic brain injuries, concussion,
Oh,
Alzheimer's,
wow.
dementia, memory loss, attention deficit, and it was much more neuropsych based. As time's gone by, though I still do that, you start feeling more confident working with just about anyone, right? And you see, the more that I do this, aside from just the purely organic neuropsych stuff, you see that we're so much more similar than we are different. And we all, when we first start, it's like you always want to see some crazy shit, right? You want to hear some amazing stories. You want to hear these.
Yeah, you want to be impactful too. It's like the hardest ones, right?
And the more you drill down, it's not about diagnoses. It's not about.
We're about to have a walk
And
through,
So,
ladies and
special
gentlemen.
guest,
Johnny
birthday
Ho!
boy,
Happy
the
birthday!
As you were saying,
Sorry.
Thrown off completely.
I love this.
The more you see, like, it really boils down to some of the same things. It boils down to self-esteem. It boils down to confidence. And literally, they're going to put this on my headstone one day, because I don't think a 24-hour section of time doesn't go by that I don't say the words inner narrative. Focus on how you talk to yourself.
Yes.
Your inner narrative, how you speak to yourself, tells you everything you need to know about why you are or aren't succeeding, why you are or aren't procrastinating, how your thoughts of failure are, and your ability to resolve that.
Why you might not like certain people.
Why you might not like yourself.
Why you might not like yourself. Oh, honestly, because I've done a lot of that work myself, and it's like life-changing when you can kind of see what your thoughts have been and to then change them.
can we? Here's a good time. Let's breach right into that. Because I have a
Okay.
friend of mine who is more or less more on the hippier side of things, and she's very big. She's a West Coast girl, and she's very big into the thought process of you could be anything you want to be if you change your inner narrative and you convince yourself. But at the same time, I disagree with that, because what you're doing is you have to do that within restrictions, because if you have that conversation to extremes, you're really telling people that they could be anything, when in reality that's not always the case. So where do you put the limitations on that? For example,
Not that you can be anything, right? It's more kind of like if you hate, like I used to hate myself. So my narrative in the mirror was like, you're gross, you're ugly, who would ever want to be with you? So to switch that narrative to you're beautiful, you're a great person, you have a great life, like that's where I think of it. You know what I mean? Versus you can do anything, you can be anything. You also have to know your limitations.
That's reasonable. My question is that's a reasonable narrative to have. How do you decipher what the limitation is when you're speaking to somebody that's having these issues where they want to convince themselves of what they're capable of, but knowing what the stop point is on that, what the stop point is on that conversation, because it's a very postmodernistic point of view where you could be anything you want to be anytime because there's a multitude of different types of interpretations of the world and everything is perception based and you can manipulate that perception to be whatever you want to be. However, there's a limited amount of actions that actually are possible in the real world.
Okay.
So, how do you find
Do you have
that?
one in mind? Because I feel like you
I
might
need
have
like a specific...
What's something that someone could say, I want to be blank, and you'd be like, no.
Well, let's go with IQ based. There's a vast majority of people that have an IQ level that I think it's 10% of the population have an IQ level that won't even allow them to get into the military. So if that person comes to you and says, I want to be an astronaut, how do you know how to pump the brakes and make a more reasonable short-term goal while not destroying
That's
dreams?
the most important part, right? Is that we don't destroy even just dreams, but confidence and someone's own belief in themselves, right? I'd rather live in a world where people say, hey, I want to do this, I'm going to try to do this, and if I don't get there, I'll be cool with where I am, than not even try at all. So to your example, right? We have someone who wants to be an astronaut. From an IQ perspective, they're not where they need to be. Depending on how young they are, my thought process would be, well, okay, let's approach this systematically. Let's list out all the requirements needed to become an astronaut.
I was just going to say that.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then let's measure up where you are right now and see where you need to be.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be the same thing in like saying, okay, here are my 1 rep maxes for all of my lifts. Here's where I'd like them to be. These are my obvious weaknesses, and this is what I need to do about it. And it might not be anything in the gym. It might be nutrition based. I might need more protein to build more muscle, to build more strength. I need more mobility because I'm not able to get to depth on a certain move that's limiting my overall. It might be rest. It might be so many other things.
That's a good example. So how do you reframe? Because I'm a very prime by the way, we all met due to fitness more or less. We all met through CrossFit Denver. We all met through different kind of aspects of physical fitness. So there'll be a lot of undertones of fitness in every podcast that we do. I guarantee.
Pretty much, yeah.
But that's a good example because I have in the past 3 years, been chasing a lot of strength-based goals.
Mm-hmm.
However, I recently found out I have L4, L5, S1 lower back impingements and herniations that restrict me from being able to pursue what was historically a goal of, let's say, cleaning 315 or whatever you want to do. But
so
how do I reframe that so that it's not failure? Because now my dream or goal is taken away from me because it is not physically possible.
Right.
But you also don't want, or maybe ever.
Or maybe.
Possibly maybe
Depends
ever.
on what you
So
want to
how
do
do
to
you
get there.
teach people to be okay with that? Maybe your dream might not come to fruition,
Sure.
but you need to be okay with pursuing the process because that is where your true gains of knowledge come from. So you got to reframe it from the end goal to the process, but knowing that there's a very good likelihood of failure.
That's one that happens a lot in the gym, I feel like, in general, right? Like, we chase things that we want, we see other people lifting heavy, or, and that's just not where some people are at.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to say, all right, what can I do? What can't I do?
Mm-hmm.
Where can I go in the middle? And do I feel comfortable there? So testing out certain things.
You said something really important there, which is the I.
Yeah.
What can I do? Where can I be? And you reference what we call should statements, sort of, right? Making these comparisons with other people without knowing anything else. It's just, okay, you just deadlifted 500 pounds. I'm watching you deadlift 500 pounds going, oh my God, she's so fucking strong.
Mm-hmm.
I should be able to do that, right? I should be able to, and I go and I approach 500 and I don't even budget a millimeter off the floor. And then the inner critic takes over. You're such a loser. You're such a failure. No one's ever going to think you're strong. And here's the big one. You're a fraud. What are you even doing here? You don't belong here. But I don't know anything about you. I don't know. Maybe you've been training this for your whole life. Maybe you are the world's most amazing deadlifter ever. I don't know. You could spend all day long just training deadlift.
Yeah.
I remember the very first, just a quick tangent, I remember the very first day I walked into CrossFit Danbury. This is 2017. Just moved to Connecticut. Literally just started CrossFit maybe 4 months before that. Still super new. The CrossFit gym I'd gone to when we still lived in New York was small. And I walk into CFD, and you're just watching like silverback gorillas everywhere.
Oh my God.
There's not a shirt to be seen. Everyone's ripped. Everyone's huge.
Yes.
Everyone's doing like this. I swear to God, I'm pretty sure I saw Pick inverted on a rope squatting 500. It's like, what am I doing here? There's some of the old school members that were there at the time, and
Brian, Lou, Austin, all those guys.
Yep.
Very strong.
Super strong, just doing. And here I am. I'm sitting on the sidelines, waiting for class to start. Going, I remember this
you don't belong
vividly.
there, right?
You don't belong here. You're a fraud. You don't look like them. You could never look like them. You'll never do what they do. Just get up and leave. And I remember getting up to walk toward the door. I vividly remember this like it was yesterday. And as soon as I opened the door to go into the lobby, to go out the front, and I literally went, no, fuck that. I don't want to do that. Turned around, walked back in, and I've been walking back in ever since, right? And it's the most healthy place ever. But if you don't harness that inner narrative, you don't do that.
It's so true.
Winding all the way back to your point about your back, how do you reframe that story without the failure referencing? There's a couple ways to do that. The first would be, okay, for reasons beyond my control, I need to shift my metric. I need to shift the parameter. So maybe it was 315. Maybe 315 is, well, what's my new max that I can do safely? Because you reprioritize something. You say, I could try my hardest to clean and jerk 315, or just clean whatever it was. But that's going to come with a risk that I might not be willing to pay. Like, I might paralyze myself doing it. And I'd like to walk when I'm 50. I'd like to walk and as long as I possibly can. I'd like to have functionality. So maybe it's, okay, maybe I won't be able to clean 315, but given the circumstance and condition, maybe I can clean 3. Maybe I can clean 250, whatever the number is, and then reframe it from that point. The other side of the fence would also be, but I can also continue to explore holistic things, medical things to try to rehab.
Yes.
There's two athletes that immediately pop up in mind. It's kind of an interesting comparison. So Adam Copeland and Brian Danielson, they're actually professional wrestlers, who were both, their careers were cut short due to concussion and neck injury. Amazing athletes, absolutely amazing athletes, who were told they would never be able to engage in the performance arts sport, whatever you want to call it, again, because of these injuries, right? I think Adam Copeland was out the better part of 12 years almost, 9, somewhere like that. And then the other guy was out maybe like 5 or 6 years, something like that. They're both actively competing again because they never gave up the hope that medicine and science and everything else would catch up to where they wanted to be. So I think it's attacking both sides. It's being realistic but never losing hope.
That's very good, and I think that my concept is also from a perspective of something that is non-alterable. I use the IQ example because that's one thing that you can't really change. Once your IQ is established, you could do certain things that can make your IQ better in specific instances, meaning your cognitive ability on specific tasks can be increased, but your overall problem-solving ability from an IQ perspective cannot be. It's one of those things that cannot be changed as a derived test. Now, it's proven. It's in all the psychological literature. It's in the psychological standards from what's called the
think
boards.
though, if you introduce something that, let's say someone with a lower IQ, like, finds a passion for, right? And they learn about it, they're gonna attain that. I've done it.
Yeah, but won't
I
change
would
your
say I
IQ
don't-
and problem-solving
well, that-
ability. But it can't. It literally can't. It's one of those things. It's not like something that's up for conversation. It's like people can have beliefs, but it's not. It's scientifically proven to be true. At least at this point, from all the studies I've heard and reviews that I've seen, everything that's been stated, that it's a factual point
Would you
of
agree?
data.
I'm
I'm
literally
just
combing
I'm just
combing my
curious.
mind of all this.
Now, but the
psych
thing is, you
literature.
do have a point along the lines where you can reframe task orientation. So your IQ can't be changed, but you could become task oriented. So it's not that your IQ itself will increase, but if you create a redundant task, you can become smarter at that redundant task. Because what you're doing is then you're training your amygdala to have a response mechanism.
At that task.
It's not you're getting smarter, you're
or-
remembering courses of action. So your problem solving ability is not increasing. What you are doing is remembering specific items and recalling specific items.
But then
So it
you
becomes
can
memorization.
recall those specific items in different areas, maybe, right? So then that can
Now you
branch
can't
out.
transversely use it in different locations.
I'm getting lost because we're talking about working memory and problem solving as if they're on the same, like part of the same cognitive module. They're not.
But they're not.
They're not. One
They're
is
not.
problem solving is a piece of executive function.
Yes.
Memory is its own.
Yeah,
domain.
well, like
So what
I
I'm
said,
saying
my
is you
memory
can't
is
change your
terrible.
IQ,
I'll
but
never
you can
change that I
nonetheless.
can't retain a certain amount of information. I'll remember it, but I can't just recall it, right? But I can the solving part of it and learning. I definitely think that you can change that and then bring that into other aspects of your life. I definitely think that.
It's not really supported. But the thing is
But,
it's not really supported.
Okay, so where is it not supported? Like, how do you know that?
Well,
though?
you know what the IQ test is. Well, I think that's a good thing for you to. You could probably describe it better than I can if you'd be so kind.
There's a variety. An IQ test is essentially measuring someone's ability to utilize knowledge that they have acquired over a course of time, right? So let's take one of the most popular IQ tests, the Wechsler, right? That's I think they're up to 4, maybe even 5th edition by now. I haven't given them in quite a long time. But you're left with sort of IQ scores in a variety of different areas and then a full scale score, right? And it's still based on I wince at IQ testing because there's so many confounds in a lot of testing. With the normative samples, there's certain populations that don't get expressed as well as others in them. I think we fixate on these sets of numbers and what they mean far more than what they actually express in the course of someone's everyday life. So to label someone 100 and higher as being average or above, right, and then that same point lower, I don't know what that really does. What does that really tell me about this individual? Until you get to a point where there are certain profound intellectual deficits, right? When you're starting to get into lower and lower and lower numbers where, okay, now this individual might not be able to care for themselves safely. Then I think it makes a really big difference. But if you take that, it's like a bell curve, right? And smack in the middle is your normative sample. What does that tell you? Great, I have an IQ of 100. I have an IQ of 145. What does that say?
Historically, it's an ability to problem solve functionality by seeing a set of parameters and then decipher those parameters to come to a correct result.
Can you give me an example?
Most IQ tests, like the baseline ones, are you'll get. This is the most simplistic portion of it, is you get increasing difficulty levels of problems to solve. Will you see 3 sets of data. One set's like circle, circle, circle. Then the next set's triangle, triangle, triangle. Then the next set is square, square. What's the last thing? It's going to be a square.
Right.
That's the exact same thing, but the thing is, the difficulty and complexity of that changes through each question.
You're talking about something called matrix reasoning.
Yes.
That's the name of the subtest. It's the ability for one to make a logical prediction based on previous information given. It's only one part of an IQ test, though. An IQ test will also look at things like vocabulary, general knowledge.
That's what I figured.
Like general information knowledge, like what is this date represent, or who is this famous person in history? I'm trying to remember. There's a little bit of memory, so recalling of numbers in a particular order, forwards and back. There's some working memory and letter number sequencing. So there's a lot of things that
but
get
can't you work
measured.
on those things?
To an extent.
No, I know to an extent, but I
To an
feel
extent.
like if you really wanted to do it, right? Like, and you study puzzles and you keep just pounding it, isn't there going to be some type of forward progression?
From what I know and from what I've researched and
Again,
from
I
the
have
information
not
that I
researched
have,
anything, so
from all the information I have, and I by no means am a doctorate on the subject. All I have is the accumulation of knowledge since I've been studying it because it really intrigues me. Is the answer is after a certain age where your brain is fully developed, I believe it's like 24 to 26 years old where your brain is actually fully developed, you cannot technically increase that baseline matrix of IQ, but what you can do is create a redundancy task. So what happens is your overall ability, if you were to take the IQ test itself over again, you would score the same if you gave different parameters. But you can take a specific task and memorize it. So if you have a redundancy of a specific task, you can create an increase in, we'll call it IQ. It's not the proper term, I can't remember it, for that specific task due to redundancy. But the problem is your increase in knowledge on that task will not convey itself into the other parts of the test. It's very streamlined into that one
but I also
unique
think
function.
like tests, a lot of time we focus on numbers of tests, we focus on numbers of IQs, and I really have to just disagree. I'm in my 30s and I still feel like I am pushing myself to learn new things, and things I would have never remembered or learned. Do you know what I'm trying to say? When I was younger. Now that I'm in a place where I can kind of mentally focus on certain things, I can learn more and this and that, and I do feel like I've gotten smarter because of that. So I don't know. So it's like I get it. I get what you're saying, but I feel like, is that necessarily really true?
Yes,
You know what I'm
because
saying?
I think that you're focusing on the test portion of it, where it's not the test portion of it that's important. It is the ability to learn. Not ability and desire are two different things. You probably always had that ability to learn, but not the desire.
Okay. All right.
So you are probably just as smart now as you were 10 years ago, but you didn't have the desire.
You saying that definitely changes my mind. Only because I do remember when I did try in high school, I would get good grades.
Yes.
So that brings us back full circle.
Yeah.
So talking about the person who might have questionable resume, so to speak. What was it? Astronaut, right? We're going to be an astronaut.
Yeah.
To go-
Ability. That's
like-
an ability, not desire. That
Right.
person has desire, not ability.
But
Okay,
if we tell that
okay.
person, so this is going back to the inner narrative.
Yes.
This is me also desperately bringing myself back to shallow water because I'm drowning in this other topic that we were just getting into.
That's okay. That's okay. And I apologize.
No,
I
it's,
want
it's,
to
No,
make-
I
no,
get
it's
it though.
totally
No,
fine.
I get it though.
I would rather that individual be told, I don't know, but let's see what you can do, and see if we can spark that desire.
I like that.
And see where it goes. I'd rather them have the opportunity from the jump to say, let's just see what happens. And okay, if I don't become an astronaut, maybe I can still work for NASA in some way. Or
Yeah, like
maybe
what
I
falls in between.
can
Like what
right.
falls in between,
Right.
where you can still be in like the field that you kind of want to be in. Yeah, you're not out in space, but
Yes.
you can be part of those, right? Like you can be
Yes.
part of the mission. You can
Yeah.
be that, or that's
Yeah.
a
How do
really
you
good way of
reframe-
looking at it, though.
That's the exact thing that you got to the exact point that I was curious about. How do you refrain from that end goal to being okay with you may fall somewhere in the middle. It's okay to have that desire, but not reaching that end product does not mean failure if
Right.
you land somewhere in the middle.
That's exactly how. There's no crafty way that we have to say these things, but we just have to say them often enough. So here's a really confounding and frustrating part about the brain, right? It doesn't do what's good for us or bad for us.
Mm-hmm.
It just does what we've given it to do before. It likes the same path, right? So if we use this bowl here, right? And everything on this side is sort of a maladaptive or unhealthy thought. And everything on this side is a healthy path, right? If we've conditioned ourselves to constantly go in this way, the brain does that on autopilot. It doesn't recognize that this is unhealthy or maladaptive or bad for us. It just does it because that's its known path. If we then replace the phrase, the sentence, the inner narrative, whatever keeps us heading in that direction, to come over here to a more adaptive, healthy way of thinking, after time, the brain will pick up on, oh, this is the new route, we're just going to do that, and it'll seem a lot less effortful. So in the beginning, when we're changing the inner narrative, it takes time, it takes effort, it's super frustrating.
Hey, look, I'm still going through it, and it's been 5 years
But
of reframing.
But I'm guessing it's less.
Oh, way less.
Where it might have been every 10 minutes at first, now it might be every other day.
Yes, and because you do it so often, and if you really put in that work, it almost becomes a new habit, right?
It's exactly
where
habit.
you don't
exactly
think about
that.
it anymore.
It's
It
exactly
just
that.
comes because you've worked so hard to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're training your. Correct me if I'm wrong. When you're training habits and habit-based, or the redundancy of habits, you're really retraining. Is that amygdala-based as well, or is the amygdala-based
Amygdala's
habitual
more-
stuff just
Amygdala is more fight fight freeze
Yeah.
response. That sort of like prepping
Okay.
you for danger and alert. That's amygdala.
Because that takes a long. The reason I'm asking is I know that kind of change mentally takes a long time series to do because it has to be ingrained
It
for a
can
long period.
spark the fight or flight because sometimes you're scared to face like what you've been through or the thoughts in your head. So you can be like, all right, I'm gonna start therapy or this or that, but it scares you to change because change is fucking scary.
It's hard.
So it does initially trigger that, I feel like, fight or flight. But once you choose fight and you keep going, I really do think that it just
There's a really important thing that has to happen, where you have to believe you're worth fighting for.
you have to have. So I've talked about this many times with Brett, Lou. Like you have to have this aha moment, right? For me, my aha moment, just for whatever reason, it wasn't me being in the hospital throwing up because of my health issues because I was unhealthy. It wasn't. It was a picture of me overweight from vacation, and I was like, this is not who I am. And okay, good question is I've always wondered, like, how do you, so everyone has their issues and they can be stuck, but it's like, how do you turn that aha moment on for someone? You kind of can't, right?
You can't do it for
you
someone
have to
else.
you have to want it for yourself because even for me, I thought so negatively. I was this way, I was that way. I didn't even know I was in it.
Right.
Like I didn't even know
Awareness is so
that I was
crucial.
like playing that part of victim and negative, and now that I can see the other side, it's like no. So it's I wish there was a way to turn on other people's aha moments.
I think you can bring them to the door. They have to open it themselves.
Okay.
I think people can sort of, or at least give them the environment to feel okay enough to just start talking out loud,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
And then once that happens, I think eventually you get there because I still think we want to get there, right? I think this is grad school was so long ago, but I think this was one of the tenets of Jungian original person-centered therapy. We have a natural inclination to want to align ourselves to the self-actualized, the best version of ourselves we can be, right? And then life holds us in other ways. And then the point of therapy, again, this is very old school from I think this was in the 60s or something. The point of therapy is to provide the person with such a healthy environment to explore and to talk that they pull themselves back to that optimal version of themselves, right? There's a lot, I think, that can confound that, but if we ultimately believe that somewhere in us is a version of ourselves that we want to express, right? And then it's just supporting that person to get to that point.
No, you're right. And it is that, and I love that though. Like, right, I love just trying to figure out how to help other people because I feel so many people are so stuck, and I felt that way, and I feel so bad almost because it's like not everyone gets those aha moments. and it's like I want that just for everyone. That's just my own.
I don't know how it plays into it, but one, self-reflection is important, and that's the point of therapy. A lot of therapy is self-reflection, but also I think that the purposeful placement into uncomfortable situations
Yes.
is the start for, because you can't, like you said, you can they have to open the door, but I think the best way to lead somebody to the door is helping them put themselves into uncomfortable situations, no matter what they are. Because all psychotherapy is like, it's exposure.
Is an uncomfortable situation.
It's willing exposure to that which makes you uncomfortable.
Yes.
Nobody's gonna heal you by keeping you safe.
Exactly. Like when I first started therapy, I've been in different therapists, this, that, but like I always kind of like lied, right? Because I'm like, I don't really want them to know my deepest, and then just something hit me where it was like, Danny, you're never gonna change until you fucking tell the truth.
Right.
So it's also like you have to be honest with yourself, and just all around. I can go on and on, but like you have
Physical
to be.
fitness helps with that, by the way, because it teaches you that you can see that physically, which also is reflected mentally. It happens the same way physically that it helps mentally, but it's easier to see it physically on your own first. So when you start holding yourself accountable for your own physical fitness benefits, and then you put that into the realm of mental health and wellness,
I really do feel like fitness and mental health go hand in hand. But I never knew that, right? Like I never would have thought that until I got into it and realized that, holy shit, moving and working out like makes me feel great. Like I'm ready to start the day. Like I make sure I work out in the morning because half the time it gives me such like the power to be like, all right, let's go, let's do this, let's start the day, and just you have that energy and it's different. It's just different.
One of my long-standing career goals, I don't know how this will ever happen, is to truly combine, let's say CrossFit, or fitness in general, but we'll say CrossFit and therapy, to do both at the same time.
I've been thinking about that a lot.
If you can conquer your inner critic physically, and you know what that feeling is, and you know that struggle both physically and mentally to battle back when your mind is telling you can't do this. If you can do that physically, then I can teach you how to do that mentally.
Yes.
Right? I remember this sort of vivid moment. It was one of the open workouts. I want to say it was maybe like 2019. I want to say 2018, 2019. You'll know the workout when I say it. It's the ones with the it's the dumbbell overhead walking lunges, and then the dumbbell on the back of the neck with the box step ups.
That was 18-2.
18-2. Okay. I vividly remember during the box step ups. Actually,
no, 18-3 was the millions. It was. I remember. I was there with you. I was literally.
You were coaching. You were judging me. You were judging my run.
You all the time.
I know you do. And this is actually really apropos, given that you were the judge, because you were actually instrumental in this. I don't know if I ever mentioned this. It was my second attempt at the WOD, and I'm on the step ups, and I'm dying. Like I saw Jesus. I saw my soul leave my body, and I'm sitting. I'm doing the movement still, and I'm running. I can see the time, and I'm running out, and I'm stopping, and I'm slowing, and I'm hemming and hawing, and this guy goes, "Fuck you doing? Just keep going." And as I'm going, like, that's so simple. Just keep going. Right? But that was the inner critic, because in my head I'm like, you're such a fraud, you don't belong here, everyone else is beating you, you suck, you're awful. And then the even worse with the fraudulent part is you tell people to come do this, you advocate and preach about the power of CrossFit and fitness overall, and here you are sucking. And you don't deserve to talk about how amazing this is if you suck at it. No. And then his voice kicks in and goes, what are you fucking stopping for? Just keep going. And it for a moment just went, oh yeah, all that other shit is just complete bullshit.
It took me
keep
so long.
Going.
Yeah.
And so that's meeting your inner critic face to face and saying no.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what I know I want to do.
Yeah.
So if you can do that physically and experience what that feels like, I can teach you how to do that.
That's a high level of discomfort.
That is such a great way of looking at it, though. Because I remember too, like. First starting CrossFit, I was freaking terrified. I'm looking at all these people. I'm like, oh my god, I'm never gonna reach that level. And Brett also put it to me in a really good way. He's like, Danny, you only just started working out. You couldn't walk down the street. These people have been training for years, so of course I'm not going to be on their level. Of course I'm not going to meet them. So I had to stop being like, that person's faster, that person's stronger. I had to be able to be okay in my mind of, this is where I am, this is where I'm at, I'm going to keep working at it,
Right.
but I can't look at other people, like, and I still have this. Me and Brett did a workout the other day, we did Annie. He's so goddamn fast. And I'm like, and then I start trying to go, and I'm like, no.
Right.
You go your own speed. Of course Brett's faster. He's been doing this forever, and it's Brett. He's, he's the Flash. So it's always something you have to remind yourself of all of it. Just learn your inner. A great book. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's called like Taming Your Gremlins.
Thought I did when you said taming.
Basically, like, those inner critic voices are your gremlins, and your gremlin always wants to make you move away from that positive goal. So you have to overcome it, and you have to start thinking of these other statements to give yourself, and you just have to keep saying them. Even if you don't believe them, if you say them enough, you start to.
Oh, it's the redundancy theory, and that's extremely important. But you have a good point with trying to correlate fitness with mental health or psychiatry-based studies, because it's one of the realms where discomfort is achieved on both platforms at the exact same time, but it's also one of the easiest ones to supersede, because it's a widely known fact that your mind will give up, because fight or flight response, your body's always trying to save itself. So your mind will stop before your body will stop. But if you could just very simply say one more rep or a little more effort, you can very easily achieve that, which is a goal. Yeah. And you could slowly but surely incrementally increase that. And what that does is it makes you more physically fit, but it also teaches you that even under discomfort, you can still succeed.
Yeah. Oh,
farther than you think.
Murph taught me that. Even though I did the reps half, I did the mile, that shit taught me, holy fucking crap, you might think you're gonna die, but you can do it.
You could be you could be in more discomfort than you think and still come out of it just fine. People are not aware of their own capabilities, because, and this is both mental and physical, so I'm not holding it to the realm of just physicality, it's mentally as well.
What's the thing? Your brain will give up
I can't
X
remember
number of
percentage, but there is a percentage.
Goggins, right? That's David Goggins. I think it's 40 is sticking out in my head for some reason.
It's a very low percentage. It's much lower
when
than
your brain is telling you to stop, you actually have like 40% more in the tank,
or
whatever,
interesting,
or whatever it is. I mean,
it's still interesting
wild,
regardless, whatever the percentage is. But I never knew that.
But the percentage is much higher than you think. Meaning, like, you have much more left than you actually know, because your body is always. Your mind and body conflict because it's trying to preserve itself, which it should. That's how we survived as a species for the entirety of our life. But occasionally, it's very good to push those limits, physically and mentally. But luckily, when you do stuff like that, you can do it at the same time.
Yeah, that's why it's so amazing, because you are doing both at the same time. You started on something really important: self-preservation and protection. The inner critic. All the negative things that we tell ourselves, in the earlier stages, we see that as protection. So the first thing that we have to do is realize, okay, maybe in some ways it helped us to a certain point, but it's done. So it's either getting rid of the inner critic by saying, I don't need you any longer, right? Like, sort of, a kid is learning how to ride a bike. So they've got training wheels, right, to make sure that they're safe. After a certain amount of time in skill acquisition, the training wheels come off, and they're able to ride the bike. The inner critic, even though it's maladaptive coping, it's not helpful coping, it's still trying to help. It's still trying to create a coping situation, right? So, but it's doing it in a really screwed up way. It's sort of the have no expectations ever, so you'll never be disappointed kind of help, right? Versus, no, let's just learn how to appropriately deal with rejection and failure.
Or appropriately learn what your goals should be. And
much more realistic
goals,
goals
instead of having it be all the way up here and meet in the middle.
And you're tempering this is one of my favorite topics, and we won't get into it today because it's another whole hour. But what you're exactly talking about is the body and mind's natural state to flirt between safety and resilience. It is what it is. And unfortunately, right now, we promote the safetyism portion of life a little more because it's a little easier to work on that side of precautionary measure than resilience. But resilience is a better long-term goal.
I feel like most people are going to try to take easy over trying to accomplish something.
Well, yeah, because but that's because they unfortunately misunderstand that easy and efficient are two different things. And that's why safety doesn't work out in the end, because it winds up being harder in the long run, but the thing is they're not considering the long run. Okay. That's why resilience is always a better option, because what it does is it prepares you for the long run, because you are always guaranteed to encounter discomfort on any level or faction, but at least you're prepared for it.
I think a lot of that's cyclical too. It's reminding me of that quote, and I don't know how this quote lands in 2022's gender dynamics, so I'm just going to say the quote how it was. I'm not making a statement about...
we do not give a fuck about that right now. Oh, that's my first F-bomb on the entire podcast. I'm so proud of myself.
I did say that.
Oh, really? Yeah, well, I don't care. I'll swear as much as I want. I just realized.
So clearly this is not getting monetized.
I don't care.
So, what is it? It's hard times make hard men. Hard men make easy times. Easy times make weak men. So it's cyclical.
Yeah, 100%. And I know exactly what you're quoting, and I believe it 100%. Right now we're flirting on that. We've made life too easy. Because listen, the life I live, I work hard.
There's no consequences anymore, almost.
Well, not only that, think how easy your life really is, all of us. We have...
Compared to what?
Compared to your grandparents.
Hell of a lot easier.
Well, yeah.
Hell of a lot
easier. Compared to your grandparents. That's the easiest way to put this. Compared to the generation before you. Let me tell you, my life is freaking easy, okay? I am very grateful for it.
Sure.
I try not to squander it. I try to pay it forward. I try to be respectful. And I try to do everything right by it, but it doesn't mean that it's not easy.
But within reason, that's how it's supposed to be. Because if we go to our grandparents, right, generation, and they look to their grandparents' generation, they're going to say, oh, we've got indoor plumbing and electricity, and so therefore, I'm not washing the clothes in the river with the washboard, thing by hand, and
it is
so they
true.
would say it's much easier there.
When you think about like your ancestors and all this other stuff, I'm like, fuck, I'm glad I don't have to wash, because like women and men had certain roles. So I'd be the one down at the creek washing the thing, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I've actually thought about that.
Traps would be sick though.
Hashtag smash wallets.
Hashtag
You would definitely also be just naturally probably in better shape, but if you were actually doing this stuff. But I'm so happy though that we're in a place where I can do what I want.
Oh, very true. But the thing is, what you want right now is different than what you want 100 years ago, because what you want now didn't exist then. So the thing is, but the goal is always to make life better for future generations. So that's always the goal. But eventually you're going to hit a hard rock, because what's going to happen is you're going to make it too good. You're going to make it too easy. And then what happens is crooked, power-driven individuals will take charge. It'll 1984 is what'll happen. It will George Orwell 1984.
Are you kind of saying like also it's like we're now like everyone gets a trophy?
I don't think that we've hit the pinnacle of simplicity. I don't think that we've hit the pinnacle of safety. I still think that the next generation is going to pay the consequences of our stupidity, but I still think that they're going to be held in very easy lifestyles. But within the next couple generations, we're going to have some sort of turn of events where the weak are exploited by the powerful to a way that creates true oppression, not the oppression that we talk about now.
Do you think that's kind of already happening?
I was words that were coming right out of my mouth.
I think that
don't
you
see
think
that,
this is already happening
no,
right now?
I think that we're I don't think it's happening per se. I think that we're creating the platform for it.
Okay, well, I feel like creating and happening are also kind of very similar.
Once it happens, I agree.
Because I feel
similar,
like it's already starting to happen.
No, because if we were smart right now, we could stop it before it becomes a true problem. However, if it does
How can you stop it though when everyone's on a different fucking side right now.
I don't have that answer. I wish I knew. But all I know is that...
Not to, like, bring it to that level, but I'm just saying.
A unifying narrative. A unifying narrative is what is needed to stop it. I don't know what that would contribute. But at the same time, we could still stop it from happening now. But if we don't stop it from happening now, it creates a very big dynamic where you're going to have a revolutionary event to take back control, as opposed to just, hey, why don't we just fix it now so we don't have to have that revolutionary moment.
I like the idea, but in order to fix something, everyone has to agree on the same problem. And I don't think
unifying narrative.
Unifying narrative, or what the problem is. And I think if you ask 10 people what the problem is, you're going to get 10 answers.
And I think in a lot of the time too, we say this needs to be fixed, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be fixed. How about we all fix ourselves first? Because 100%. We can't fucking fix anything if we don't have the tools to even do it for ourselves.
Well, two things. You just said tools, so I'm going to segue to the tools part in 1 second.
Tools.
But you answered it though. You asked 10 people, they'll give you 10 different answers. The answer is that you're going to get 10 answers. No one's going to say there's not a problem. So the problem
but everyone's going to say it's a different problem.
Yeah, but the problem is there's a problem. So you'll get 10 people saying there's a problem. No, truth. Because
no, I'm just laughing because it's so interesting, right? It's like, again, everyone thinks something else is the problem, or you think this is the problem, or you think that's the problem, and that's kind of where we are right now.
Right.
Where it's like before, right? And I'm sorry, I know I ramble a lot, so I'm sorry, but like it used to be like problems happen like this, right? Like this would happen, then something would happen, then something would happen. Now it's like
I'm not sure that's the case.
No?
I think it's just we know about it more now.
Yes.
So in that time frame,
okay,
it was
your
source of news was the local paper, or that's it.
Very good call.
Then in the, I think, late 70s, early 80s, you usher in the 24-hour news cycle. There's a really interesting book, Culture of Fear, I think was the name, where they're talking about the need to keep the 24-hour news cycle going. Right? And if you're keeping a 24-hour news cycle going, you need to have viewers. You need to have eyes. How many times can you say the same thing and get the same response? So you have to keep upping the ante. There's a big difference between how many people would you get watching your program if it was, hey, it was sunny today and everyone was beautiful and it was a great day, versus the thing lurking in your medicine cabinet that's going to kill you. Is it in your medicine cabinet? We'll tell you at 10.
That's so true. You know, I never really thought about that.
They have to keep you scared.
Well,
whoever the they is, I'm not trying to get like conspiracy theory, but if there's no fear,
I like conspiracy theories.
I like them too. But
I'm not saying they're always right. I'm just saying I do like going down
sometimes
that road
they're just for funsies.
of just
Sometimes
I love
you
the
know.
funsies, and sometimes you actually think it's written. Whatever. I totally lost my next thought, but
I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I like it because I never thought of it that. Oh, I know exactly what I was gonna say. I didn't realize. And I can't remember like what year it was and what year they got rid of it, but like news had to back in the day present both sides. If you had a story and you had a side, but you also had to present the other. But then I can't remember what got rid of it, and I think that.
It's also interesting what counts as news. Something happens on Twitter and it's news. I remember, and I'm gonna probably get the people wrong, so my apologies, but. It was like Rihanna's cousin or someone's family member somewhere had an STD, and it was causing problems on Twitter because there was like Twitter back and forth, and they reported it on the news. And in my brain, I just went, could you imagine Walter Cronkite talking about somebody on Twitter and their STD? So what counts as news, I think, has also changed. But again, it's this monster you have to keep feeding. Yeah. You need all of this in order to justify its existence.
It's scary that we need that, though, because it's always...
We don't need it. We don't need it.
But, like, a lot of people think they do. And I feel like it also... it's always fear-based. It's always fear-based.
There's a reason for that. There's a psychology-based reason for that, because the things that go well, your body and mind do not have to remember, because they don't create threats.
Yeah.
You are naturally driven towards...
But not everything is a fucking threat.
But you're naturally driven towards the fear side or conspiracy side or the negativity side, because what they represent immediately is a threat, a possible threat. And a possible threat will draw your attention because you are naturally going to bring your attention to that to help save your own life. So anything that's negative, fearful, or threatening will draw your attention way more than anything positive because it commands a response.
Yeah, you're right.
That's why if you see a furry little chinchilla or a snake, you're immediately going to pay attention to what the snake is doing.
I don't know. I might pay attention to the chinchilla more than
you
the
will have.
snake.
That's why when you were born, the first time you saw a snake, you don't know why, but you reacted to it. You're naturally programmed for that.
Just kind of like dogs.
I got two thoughts on this. One, I hope the snake and the chinchilla aren't in the same area, or that's going to get real violent. The other thing I'm wondering is, how much of fear is this sort of in your DNA program thing versus taught?
Learned, yeah.
Right. So my daughter, right. So she's an amazing resource for all of my wonderful psychological underpinnings and what's the word I'm looking for? Like theories. Because I get to watch her right now. Again, that's not an appropriate sample size. It's just one person, whatever. But
yeah, but it's yours.
But it's mine,
yes,
and I have 24-hour access to it. So when we brought her home, right, we have 3 pretty large dogs, and she's never been afraid of dogs, so she's always been around dogs, right? So the fear wasn't taught. In fact, we're trying very hard not to instill too much fear, right? There's certain things we're obviously trying to train her not to do because they're dangerous, but we're also trying to allow her to engage in somewhat risky or dangerous things safely as possible, right? So she's climbing on everything, and even though it gives her mom and myself an absolute heart attack, and we're close enough to obviously, if she was in real danger, interact, but she's fearless, right? She's fearless. And so it contributes to this thought of, well, I think a lot of fear is instilled by the people around us.
Oh no, I absolutely agree.
Looking
back, I would have never thought that it would have been learned, but when you kind of take a step back and you look at how you were raised and all this other stuff, a lot of stuff starts to make sense. So if you can teach your kids, basic coping skills, this, that, and the other, I think that's a great way to do it, right? I was so afraid of so many things, and now I'm trying, even if I am afraid, to still kind of force myself, even though I don't want to, because I want to get over that fear-based reaction.
I love the
like
biological versus non-biological.
Who wants to be in fear?
Well, you don't want that you...
I really like that, though.
Well, the thing is, we know for a fact that you have biological-based preferences that you were born with, meaning you have natural reactionary skills that are pre-programmed into you from birth. Now, here's the problem. Your daughter can't even speak yet, so you don't know what her first very initial reaction was to your dogs. So she might have been... fearful doesn't mean you turn and run away, it just means you're precautious.
Sure.
However, she also knows that you are her guides in life as her parents. So she trusts you. So what could override her fear is your guidance, and your guidance brought an introduction to the dogs into her life, which now makes her fearless to the dogs. Let's say that you never introduced her to dogs at all, good or bad, but you waited to the age in which she could speak, and then she's in a locked room by herself, dog walks in, whether it's a friendly dog or a non-friendly dog. Well, here's the thing, let's say you introduce her to both. She'll have a natural reaction to both based on her interpretation of the atmosphere created by what is in the room.
So she can't speak, you're absolutely right, in terms of words, but she has been communicating facially, or even just, there's certain...
Your eyes, too. I feel like your eyes can tell, you can tell
I know
so
when
much.
she's scared.
Yeah.
I know when...
I believe that. It's not to be
Did
scared.
you see the train just leave the station as it
Well, it's not to be afraid of something when your father or mother are holding you. Does that make sense? Because
say that?
When your parents it depends. So you said it's hard to be afraid of something when your parents are holding you. If you trust your parents.
If you trust your parents, but at the age of 0.
Oh.
That's bull. So
at the age of 0, it's biological only. And your biological biological precursors have you adapted strictly to your parents, especially your mother?
I was going to say more mom than dad.
Because 100% it's who you have to rely on for the source of life biologically. Because remember, formula didn't exist. Without your mother, you die because you don't get fed. So you have an immediate trust and necessity for your mother.
Yeah.
Well, you lived in there too, so I
Right.
feel like you know that.
Which also makes no sense that when you come out, you're considered day one, when really you've been growing for
Right?
almost
You
10
should
months.
almost be,
You
like,
should be like 10 months old,
yeah.
basically, when you
Yeah,
come.
that is weird.
It's an odd, but
It is
it'd be
very
so hard
odd,
to
yeah.
then, like, actually, like, have, like, a birthday and a,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
No, that's true.
And then.
That is
you know,
interesting.
get-
Can I hijack the conversation for a total change of
No.
subject?
Yeah.
Good. Because you're like the one person I wanted to talk to about this. I've been doing a lot of given the fact that you're in the mental health realm,
Mhm.
there's been a lot of recent studies within the past 15 years and a lot of pursuit on psychedelics as a use of therapy for people that have multiple different kinds of mental health issues. What is your take on that? Is it a viable approach to possibly helping somebody? Because nothing's ever a guarantee. And two, at what point do we have to say it's for medicinal purposes and the world needs to pump the brakes on the full decriminalization or legalization of it?
I also have a question. Because, like, also it's like, who are the people that are doing these studies, and like how are they getting into that, right? Or are they scientists? Are
Yes,
they
yes,
therapists?
yes,
Are
yes,
they both?
yes.
Like, you know, so
Both.
I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
100%.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
Yeah.
110%. They're actually Yale, Harvard, Ivy League school studies. The broad Stanford's doing studies
Because
on
I
it
do
currently.
know someone who went through the ketamine program.
Yeah, and it's been studied. It actually started in the late 40s, early 50s. Late 40s. Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World, actually was so intrigued by it that he took a synthesized form of mescaline and wrote Doors of Perception based on his experience with mescaline. And he has different perceptions of what they should do with this kind of medicine or drug. And there's a bunch of different. Everybody's got their own perspective on what we should do with it based on legalization, criminalization, use in therapy.
Right.
So what's your thoughts on the use in therapy, and at what point do you kind of like, pump the brakes on the legalization or decriminalization of it, meaning access to the broader spectrum of society? Because
like to everyone versus in a therapy session.
Exactly,
or
me
or with
being
like a
able
professional.
Yeah, because I've done like you could buy psilocybin, you can buy mushrooms legally in Massachusetts. Like I've done mushrooms before, and I've done it in.
Which I want to talk to you about later.
Yeah,
that's fine. I do want to talk to you about that with it being legalized in Massachusetts. But because I have questions.
No, well, and I've done it in a controlled arena as part of like a group experience.
Did you do mushrooms or
Mushrooms.
did you just like microdose?
Mushrooms. No,
Okay,
I did mushrooms, and I did it legally, and I did it in a very good context. But I also have my own perspective on not only the experience.
No, go on.
Well, the thing is, it's like I don't necessarily trust anything you can buy. I don't trust people. My issues weren't even with the drug as much as people. Like I
don't
won't buy
trust
anything.
now.
Yeah, I won't go to the
fact
corner of
that
the street and buy
marijuana that has fentanyl in it now scares the crap out of me.
So that being said,
all those
from
those things.
from a mental health standpoint,
now
use in psychotherapy.
Yeah.
And your thoughts on that, and then use recreationally, and your thoughts on that.
Sure, and it's huge right now. I get flyers on a weekly basis for asking to come join a study or come learn about the treatment or the therapy, and it's intriguing. But I want to start on a platform before even getting to that of why things are legal or illegal, especially when it comes to substances, has absolutely nothing to do with whether they're good for us or not. Case in point.
I agree.
This has been legal forever. That only became legal relatively recently.
That's more dangerous.
From my own personal experience, every bad, aggressive, and potentially deadly decision that I made had way too much of this.
Bingo.
I've only regretted maybe having 2 pizzas to myself. And maybe sleeping for like
an extra hour or two.
Like a day. Right. So let's start with, let's take legality off the table, because again, at the risk of sounding very Rogan-y right now, the legality of things and why they became illegal in the first place is questionable at best.
Agreed.
So let's talk about therapeutically. Now, when we'll talk about just not just psychedelic, but all substance-assisted therapy. That could be nearly anything, right? All it then becomes is, and this is going back to tools, is it becomes a tool. And that's the most important part. With any part of treatment or therapy, it's never the modality. And it's never the tool. It's what you do with it, right? So for instance, someone might respond really well to cognitive behavioral therapy. Someone else might respond really well to DBT or ACT or schema work or whatever, right? And that's just based on preference and what's appropriate. In the same way, someone else might need some sort of a substance to help in some way, whether it's unlock a previous trauma, which is what a lot of the psychedelic work is being done. So there's some interesting studies coming out of Denver with PTSD, right? And helping them unlock the ability to even discuss the trauma.
Those are MDMA studies.
Those are MDMA studies.
Those are the
Wow.
MDMA studies, yeah.
I recently had someone I was working with. Now, this is the limitation, right? They did not go about it the legal way because the legal way doesn't exist just yet. But they use DMT. And with DMT, actually with most of these substances, what really is happening is they're destroying the blockage of the ego, right? And they're allowing you to access like all of your thoughts, everything, stripping away that like filter, stripping away that the ability to lie to oneself.
Thank you. And that's what I was saying. The ability to lie to your therapist is just it kind of
or even lie to yourself.
yeah.
Well,
Yes.
yeah.
Normally we're lying to our therapist because we're lying to
Yes.
ourselves,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. So if we can't do that, and this is why I think it does need to be done therapist assisted, is that sometimes we open a box we don't know how to close. You can do that just with talk therapy. You can do that with look, you can get drunk one night with your buddies.
Everybody has
And,
gotten drunk
right,
one night.
and like and you start talking,
Oh,
and you
God,
start
yeah.
crying
Oh, yeah.
because you start thinking, and you stop lying to yourself. Now, was it because of the alcohol? No, but whatever the substance was
It
a
helped.
tool. It was the key to unlock the door. That behind that door was all the shit that needed to come out.
Well, alcohol just reduces
But
anxiety.
I feel like
is what it does.
Hold on,
It can
quick
also ramp
question,
up
though.
anxiety. Same way that marijuana.
Yeah.
Two seconds. The same way that marijuana can make some people really, really calm and chilled out, or it takes someone else and dials them up into super anxiety and
super
paranoia. Right.
Super paranoid.
It's enhancing what you're already bringing to the table.
So then question then, right, like with drinking, I feel like sometimes though that substance will bring out a completely different personality trait that you would never have sober. And that's what's interesting to me.
It depends on the substance too, I believe.
And
different
I feel
substances
like
will have different reactions.
Very true.
It is true.
I've never experienced someone having and again, I've only really have experience with like ecstasy, Molly, and like mushrooms and drink whatever. So I've only found alcohol is the only one that I've seen really truly bring out like these crazy sides to people that I've never seen before, and that interests me so much because I'm like, how is that legal? Right? And we're allowing this to happen. It's just very interesting how something can be illegal that's so terrible for you, yet something's been proven to even like cure alcoholism, and it's just deemed bad because someone else said so.
Oh yeah, that's
You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly it. And
what happened when Nixon started it with his war on drugs.
Yes.
That's where like,
But,
cause
like,
the late
that's-
50s they were doing a lot of studies
It's on
on
military studies, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
It was very cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they
But
sound
then
negative
all of
because
them
they couldn't
had to
control.
stop.
Yeah,
That's
well,
why.
and that leads you down a rabbit hole of conspiracy,
Of
but
conspiracy,
a lot of it
yes.
makes sense.
Yep. And
But
it was
what's
Nixon
sad
era.
though is that then all the science research had to stop with it. So
Yes.
all the things that we could have learned, we didn't learn.
You would love Michael Pollan's research.
Okay.
Michael Pollan did a lot of the research in exactly what you're speaking about. I think he has a documentary series on Netflix right now as well. He was interviewed by Joe Rogan. He's
Wait, is that the one with the psychedelics? Or
yeah, he did.
Oh,
he
I
did,
watched the first episode.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, and he wrote a book as well, and his book is great. But he starts with the fact that everything was being studied for therapeutic. It was being scientifically studied in the late 40s to early 60s.
A lot earlier than I even thought.
Yeah, before Nixon took over and the war on drugs took over, then DARE occurred in the 80s, and then the
What does
compounding
DARE
of that.
stand for? Me and Brett were driving, so tangent, we were driving the other day, and we're like, shit, what the F does it stand? Drugs aren't,
Drug and alcohol, something,
alcohol, resistance.
Education?
Education, the E. I was like, what the hell is
Drug
the
and
E?
alcohol
Of course
resistance
it's education. We were just making
Should we
up
check
random
that
shit.
so we're not like...
No, yeah, I'm
double
gonna
check.
do, like, what's his name?
I can't, my phone's on the...
I'm gonna do
What's his
Because I'm like,
name?
this is
Yeah.
because I had DARE in elementary school.
sure,
But
yeah.
I'm like, I
Sure,
don't
right.
remember any of it. You know, like, I'm like, what
We're checking
did
now,
it stand
folks.
for? I don't remember.
I won an award in the 5th grade
Me
for
too!
a letter I wrote
Yes!
for DARE.
Me too, and
And
I got
then-
to read it out loud to
I
my
did
whole
too!
school. Yeah!
And then,
Hilarious
and
that
then 10 years later,
breaks.
Yeah, you know.
Drug abuse resistance education.
I feel like we said that.
No, we said drug and alcohol.
Oh,
Wait, drug abuse.
Drug abuse
Okay,
resistance.
okay.
Remember, this is your brain on drugs. All that
Those
commercial did was make me
commercials
hungry.
I just
alright?
wanted
Or
eggs.
hilarious.
Yeah, I
I just
wanted
wanted
eggs.
eggs. Yeah, like
I liked the one where if you smoked pot, you were just like melted into like a
I mean, that's not
Yeah.
not true.
I'm like, no, but like
It's
it's
not
not
true.
always that
I mean, if you had a
though.
good time.
I mean, if every time I melted, I
Right.
definitely would not smoke pot.
Yeah, I
You
know.
know what I
it's-
mean?
But as we were
Sorry,
saying,
As we were
I
saying.
know, I know. We
digress.
go, we.
I know.
There's anything. I
That's
think
what's great
I
is
digress.
we go on tangents, and I love it.
Well, it's we're on the same
anything
topic though. We're on the
anything
same
can be
topic.
healthy for you, and I think in a lot of ways, too much of anything can also be unhealthy. Look at
That's so true.
one of the most healthy things you can do is stay hydrated, right? Water. Drink too much water, it'll kill you.
Isn't that crazy that you can drink
Water
so much water?
intoxication is a
Oh.
real thing.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
and
it's
it's called
awful.
It's called dry drowning.
It happened
Yeah,
on
it's
the
called dry
news
drowning.
where there was like a contest.
Oh,
to
we
well,
for a week.
yeah.
They made this. I remember this vividly. They made because the rules about all sorts of radio and media changed drastically after
Yes.
this. It was for. It was when the Nintendo Wii
Oh my God,
was
it
like
for that?
was Wii for a week.
Wow.
So the idea was, in order to get the console, you had to keep drinking water
Yeah.
throughout their broadcast and not
Stop,
urinate.
Yeah.
And-
Which is
Yeah.
terrible.
And this lady, in a relatively short amount of time, I don't know, it
Died.
was well over a gallon of water, well over,
Oh, yeah.
right? And they didn't let her. And then eventually she started having some medical problems, and yeah, she died later that day.
Well, yeah, easily. You're poisoning yourself.
I remember this one time.
You push back through your kidneys. You literally poison yourself to death.
I was trying to do a really adult thing and buy life insurance, and so the nurse came over to my house to get a urine sample and a blood sample, and
They come to your house?
yeah, look at that, right?
Okay.
This was fancy. And so I'd had water, and I thought I was going to be easily able to produce a sample. She hands me the cup, nothing's coming out. So I start chugging water, right? I'm doing 32 ounce Yetis at a time. I give her the sample, she leaves. I start feeling awful.
Oh,
Yeah.
Like that,
no.
like the worst level of drunk when you realize how drunk you are. And it was bad. I was done the rest
Well,
of the day.
it's
I
'cause
was
Wow.
nauseous. I was dizzy. I was
Yeah.
throwing up water
Oh.
constantly. It was coming out of my eyelids. It was
What?
awful. Nose,
Out of your
eyelids, just
eyelids?
everything.
It has to, because it comes through your colon faster than your kidneys can process it out of your blood. So your body has to expel it.
Yeah.
What you should have done, and I hate saying
Salt?
this,
Oh my
No, no.
God.
you should have worked. You should have ran or cycled. You
Oh,
should have,
'cause it
because
would
your body
sweat
can
out?
expel a
Oh,
lot
sweat.
through sweat.
I was too dizzy, man. I would have.
No,
Yeah,
I know.
right?
Passed
I
out.
know, you have to be on like a
Even
stationary
hurt
bike.
himself
Yeah,
even more.
like,
I
that's
was
the-
I was
Next
messed
thing you know, I was
up.
like, damn.
I was messed
Oh,
up.
wow.
That was a
Yeah.
while ago. That was a long time ago. Yeah.
So
Interesting.
Anyway, anything will kill you.
oh, and anything can kill you.
Well,
the
yeah.
the question. Then the second part of that question is, at what point?
Did I even answer the first
Yeah,
part
you
of the
did.
question?
You did it. You did from like the therapeutic standpoint and how you can use it in therapy.
Mm.
But now the other pursuit is because it's becoming such a viable, healthy option for people with mental health disabilities, or it helps you reconnect with different parts of your life that they want to do it recreationally.
Mm.
Now, I'm not I'm American. I think everybody should be able to have their own rights and decisions. But the fine line with any kind of recreational drug, especially this, I have trouble saying no to anything when this is legal. I get it. But it's when the right for you to do something becomes my responsibility.
How is
Meaning-
it your responsibility?
Meaning when I have to pay the consequences of your ability to do a drug.
Okay.
Now,
What's
the
the
argument's
No, but
the- first of all, the argument's invalid, and I'll be the first person to admit that the argument is invalid because liquor is legal, and there are more deaths in there's more negative side effects to liquor than any other drug that's on the market at all. So
By
my
far,
argument is
yeah.
100%
By far.
invalid.
Yeah.
Well, it's not invalid. It's just
It's
you have-
nullified almost, because unless you make this illegal, you can't make. In my mind, if you make this illegal, then you can make anything else illegal. But if this is legal, which I'm very glad that it is, you can't make any of that other stuff illegal because you're becoming a hypocrite at that point. But when you make it legal for everybody to experience it, and they start experiencing it incorrectly, and they start when
isn't that anything now?
abuse of any substance has negative side effects to the broader culture or the broader society. How, at what point is regulation necessary?
We don't. Case in point.
Case in point. So I know that I nullified my own question, but it's like
It's a good question because then
Well-
maybe the hard answer is some of this stuff.
So sometimes I
you
feel
know?
like
As I'm pouring myself a little bourbon.
some people
No, I agree
like
with you,
it
though. It's tough.
more because they can't have it, kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's illegal. It's
I know.
intriguing to them. It whatever. So maybe decriminalizing it. One, I think also you can get some of that shit off the street that is actually killing people, right? Because they're lacing it with stuff, they're fucking with it, and that's, I think, a lot of the reason people die from it.
It also costs less though. So if you go
Yes,
to the corner
and
and buy
you're right,
weed
you're
versus
right.
you go to the dispensary,
Yes.
right? The dispensary is awesome. I remember my
Yes.
first time
I
ever.
agree with that.
My first time ever
Yeah.
going into a dispensary, I thought it was
No,
bullshit.
you're right.
They were like, "How do you want to feel? How do you want to say? How do you want to wake up the next day? How do you want to?"
Well, I feel
I'm
like
like,
all
"This
of
is
that
nonsense."
bullshit,
It was
though.
all true.
No,
It was
but
all true.
I think it's different for everyone though, because so with weed, right?
Yeah.
I can have an indica strain, but it doesn't get me tired. I almost kind of think it's chemistry based on who's doing it, right?
Sure.
So like a sativa, which is supposed to be more higher of an alert, you're awake.
Yeah.
Sometimes that more acts like a sedative for me.
Right.
So I feel like
But you can say the same thing about alcohol.
that's true.
We could sit here and polish off like a case of, I don't know, Bud Light, Coors Light, and it's water and there's no reaction. Yeah, it's not good because, you know, I tend to like double and triple IPAs. But if I'm going to sit there and drink double and triple IPAs all day, I am going to be messed up. Right? It's going to be a very different, you know,
Very
version
different.
of.
That's true.
I just drank some Bud Lights.
Yeah.
And,
No, that's
and
true.
perfectly okay.
No, that's very true.
I actually learned something very scientific that was very intriguing to me about alcohol in the last year.
What's that?
Why you make stupid decisions while you drink alcohol. Believe it or not, you, at all stages of your intoxication, know when something is dangerous. You do. When you're super drunk and make super stupid decisions, you know it's dangerous when you make it, you just don't care. What it doesn't reduce your ability to decide if something is stupid or not. What it does is it completely eliminates your inhibition towards it. It's very, like, all the studies are in on that, and I didn't know that, but it makes total sense why drunk driving occurs. You know it's wrong.
It just
However,
turns
you
off
just
that.
don't care.
care.
It-
Yeah.
So does alcohol just turn off that?
Your inhibition.
Okay.
And which is why men have easier time hitting on women when they're drunk. That's why drunk sex is
Well,
popular
that's
at
why
first. That's why
women
drinking
also-
and hitting on women is first.
But hold on,
And vice versa.
Vice versa.
And vice
because
versa.
I used to use drinking when I was younger because I was so anxious
It
to be able to
reduces that.
socialize. I would be like, the life of the party. Hey, this is me. No alcohol. I'm like anxious, terrified.
That's why.
Don't talk to me. It changes everything.
I thought that was super intriguing.
And no, that is. I
Because-
didn't know that.
Because every time I did something stupid while I was drunk, I knew it was stupid. I
I
just
still
didn't
don't.
care.
Sometimes I'm
You
like,
know?
how am I alive? I would drunk drive a lot when I was younger, which I'm like, I look back on it, I'm like, you stupid idiot. But again, our brain, right? Like when we first start, I want to say not most. I started drinking at a lot younger age than I think most people. So my brain didn't have that growth and knowledge of knowing what is right and wrong. Truly, I look back now and I know, and it kind of terrifies me that someone gave me a license at 16. You know what I mean? It's very interesting to see how these affect certain people, and if you start drinking at a younger age, you're more prone for this, or it's just substances in all different ways amaze me and also confuse me and all of it.
Yeah,
it's just interesting.
Substance and its reaction. I'm staring at the cabinet over there, and there's some supplements, right? I see some pre-workout, right? And I see I think some
that's
collagen,
a light
some
stack
collagen.
that's a
actually,
light stack of stuff.
I was gonna say for knowing Kev as well as I do,
I'm off of
those
things.
are all legal, so I'm surprised that they're there.
They're all legal that I do.
Yeah, when you get them from other countries, you start getting a little questionable.
Okay.
But even still, so we're used to seeking a different effect through something even like that. Like you take a pre-workout because you want that ability to push through a barrier, or because you want to feel that elevation. It's no longer, if you think about the word supplement in addition to, let's say you're already like good nutrition, right? So you take a whey protein supplement because either due to convenience or access, you're not able to get the amount of protein you need from your food source. So that is truly a supplement. It's an addition to. But some of these other things aren't necessarily things we make on our own. And we take them.
No,
ready
I
for
agree.
this? Caffeine, and you two are great for this. Like, ready for this? Caffeine is the number one. You guys drink caffeine daily? Okay. Yes?
More than daily.
Okay. Here we go. Ready? Caffeine is a verified neurostimulant.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So, you drink caffeine every day, even at minimal intake. Now, caffeine is a psychedelic. Michael Pollan research is very cool on this because he took 3 months off caffeine and went back on it, and it was a psychedelic experience. You don't realize you don't realize it's a psychedelic experience because you experience it daily. However, if you think about this, the you that you know every day is caffeinated. The you that you know has a neurostimulant every day inside of you. So, you don't know yourself truly uncaffeinated.
Yeah, we were just talking about this the other day. Yeah.
And that's a different person.
Interesting.
That is a different person.
Well, yeah, I totally agree. Now that you say it, it's very obvious. But I would.
But we don't know what that other person is.
But I would never have thought about that.
Grumpy.
No.
When we talk about grumpy, when we talk about addiction,
it's wild just to think about it that way.
I know for a fact I'm more addicted to the routine of coffee, the ritual of coffee, than I am coffee. I get no measurable bump in mood. Measurable because I haven't abstained from it for long enough. But I don't feel any. I'm acknowledging that. But I don't feel any energy bump from caffeine whatsoever. But what I am very much addicted to is the ritual around it.
I agree.
Whether it's making the coffee, so I pour over coffee, so I have control of every little bit of it. I grind the coffee, I heat the water to it, right? And you do this, and you're watching the whole time. It's a very mindful experience. It's a lot of fun. It's the ritual.
I agree.
Right? Yeah, but you could do that with decaf.
Well, hold on, but
decaf is disgusting.
It is.
But technically, you could do that with decaf.
You could,
but
give
it's
me
not the same.
You know what? You find me a decaf. Find me a decaf bean that tastes good. I'll do it.
All right, I like that. But I do agree because I'm not someone who wakes up in the morning and needs coffee. If anything, I actually don't really want it in the morning. It kind of makes me nauseous. My routine is I do a workout. I go to Starbucks and I get a coffee, and then at nighttime I love my espresso machine, and I just like the one, putting packing it down,
ritual,
and
right?
then I love, and you should see me. I'm staring at my coffee machine as it drips. I'm like, and then you sip it, and you're just like, And I could stop probably drinking that coffee right after that first sip and be satisfied.
And it would probably be just as true if we found something else that had nothing to do with the substance.
Yeah.
Also, talk to someone who rolls their own joints to smoke weed. It's a ritual, right? You have your favorite little flat surface, and
It
you're
is
pulling the
so, oh my God,
stems,
no,
and
you're
you're like,
so
you're
true, and
rolling
everyone's
it.
different.
And you have your ritual, you have your procedure, right? It's the ritual
Oh my God,
of
it is true.
Same thing you could say to some extent with alcohol. Now, not what we just did, just pouring and sipping, but like, let's say we.
Well, he liked
like,
ice, you didn't.
Okay, that's a preference
Right.
thing, right? That's a preference thing.
But I'm just saying, it's different. Everyone has, you know.
Yeah. But it's also like, let's say it was a ritual, right? Where I would sit in a certain chair with a certain type of lighting in a certain room, pour a certain amount of bourbon, and
Okay.
really make it a mindfulness experience. Really, smell it, and get into it, right? Then it's that same ritual.
Oh, that's so interesting. So you know what? I actually, and I've been doing it more myself. Is doing it with eating. Is making it where I used to just sit in front of the TV. I'd scarf down my, but I realized with digestion that was fucking terrible for me. And I even tell my clients this. I'm like, sit down, take a bite.
When's the last time you enjoyed a meal?
Put your fork down after, and just like let your thoughts come in.
Can
and
you
then
do that?
Like, yeah.
Can
Oh
you
my
do it?
God,
Okay.
Kevin. It was like a whole new experience for me. I've told my clients to do it all the time. I didn't necessarily always follow my own advice, and I started to. And I have to say, I was like, wow, I enjoyed that meal so much more. I could feel the benefits from it.
Yep.
I could taste it. I enjoyed it, and I didn't rush it. And I could actually tell when I was actually full.
And think about it. If you go to like a decent restaurant to eat, there's no TVs.
No.
You're not watching TV while you're eating. You're forced to almost engage, unless you're the kind of person that's pulling out your phones and the whole family's on phones.
Yes, that's
all right,
true.
aside.
Or, yeah.
Otherwise, you're like engaging in conversation. You're experiencing your meal, right? I don't know why that doesn't typically translate to home.
I
Well,
think because so
we
many
lost that
people, at least from what I've seen in the people that I've worked with, they feel like they have no time. They don't think about meal prepping. They don't think about in advance shopping. So it's on the go. Okay, I have only this amount of time during my break, so. But I say to them, I'm like, you can always find the time. Like, if you have a lunch break, use that fucking lunch break and enjoy your meal. Because one, you're gonna de-stress. You're gonna de-stress. But if you're, and I mean, sometimes watching a show, laughing, that's also gonna make you de-stress. But I think just taking the time and enjoying it, putting your fork down, just letting all of it soak in, it really is different. And I would have never thought I would have thought that until I tried it.
It's ritualistic standardization, which means that if you have something that you do on a consistent basis, you always have a base to bring back and calm down to, because what it does is it creates a standard in your life that's always going to be there. And I'd like to argue one thing too.
Go
like,
for it.
if it's the ritual or the timeline ritual, it wouldn't matter if it's bourbon or something else. If it's the action and not necessarily the product, I think it's both. I think it's both.
75-25?
Yeah. Like I'm not.
I don't know. I'm willing to argue the percentage.
I'm not pushing it because I believe that you could also change any habit you want to change. Like I've done too much reading to argue the fact that you can't change habits. But the good thing about habits is they bring you back to a baseline, and that baseline, it's not that it's comfort. What it means is you have a standardized practice, which also means that you have something that you can trust. It's the same concept of making your bed when you wake up, so that way when you go to bed, it's clean. At night, you have
it's also starting the day
something
with a
that's
win.
consistent in your life. And the best part about having consistency in your life is the ability to break it. If you have no consistency, you have nothing to break. Then your life is filled with chaos all the time. Chaos is not good for your mental health. It's fun in chunks.
And I think people don't realize to make habits, you have to start small, because you're not going to just immediately get it.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Although some people I do.
Well, everyone differs. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong.
I also
Everyone's
think
different.
that like your aha moment statement before, it's like I do think that certain things in your life will happen which can create and generate an immediate change that does stick. I think that there are certain things in your life that are so giant that can do that. Children immediately change it. They not only do they change your actions and reactions, they change your mentality literally immediately. Now, when your wife's pregnant, the second you meet your child, I know because I've seen it in every one of my friends. I don't even have children, but coming
No,
from
I
an outside
agree.
perspective,
Yeah.
I watch it and I
Yeah.
see the immediate change, and it's always been
It's
for
the
the better.
second, I say this, I talk about this all the time. When people ask what it's like being a dad
disagree
or
with
whatever, but like the second they put her in my hands, right? The second I'm looking at her, so many things about what I thought I knew and what I thought I believed changed completely. And like for instance, I never wanted to be an old man, right?
Yeah.
All right, never wanted to. I'd be like, you know what? If I tap out in my 70s, early 70s, late
Really?
60s, like I don't care. I'm good. Like whatever, fine.
But now that you have
Now that I
her,
have, I am gonna like give me every damn day because I, want to see her
that.
grow up.
I
You know
love
what I
that,
mean?
though.
I want to be there for as much as I possibly can.
Wow. That is a major
It's a huge shift.
shift.
It doesn't really change anything. It's not as if I was living like recklessly before to sort of
Just
have
because
that.
your
But
mind shifts doesn't mean
Yeah.
everything changes.
But the other part of it is, and this isn't to downgrade or invalidate anything I've done. I've done some really cool things. I hope to continue. But again, in that moment, we could do a whole nother episode just on the psychology of having a kid. Looking at her going, okay, here is this 30-minute-old baby in my arms. It's just the most beautiful thing in the world, but it's literally contributing nothing at this moment. And I look at her and I go, yeah, I don't matter anymore. It's not about me. In the best way possible. It's not about everything.
I
and this
totally
kind of goes
get that.
back to what we were saying before about wanting the best for the future generation. I look at her and I go, yeah, everything I do now is to ensure your success, your safety, your survival. So that I know by the time I do die, the only thing I need to know is you're going to be okay. I've done whatever I can to set you up as best I can so that you'll survive.
That's
and then I can die.
That's a great mentality.
It's a very good paternal instinct.
But I don't think that everyone has that.
No. Paternal instinct is real though, but what you do with it, it can be bad.
I'm not saying paternal instinct
I'm talking about
isn't,
paternal
isn't
instinct.
real. I'm just saying not everyone
has that.
No.
Not everyone can have a baby and then
it turns
that
positive.
things don't turn on.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's...
I think desire is a part of it. Like I wanted a baby. I wanted kids. Right? When did that happen too late? Was it whatever? I don't know. Can't say. I think it happens when it happens for a right reason. But yeah, like I agree that like not everyone has that.
Yeah, no, not everyone, and
it's
and
what
that's
you
a
do
fear
with
of
it.
mine too.
I think that everybody has that initial reaction. It's what they do with it that matters. I think that everybody has an initial paternal and maternal reaction, knowing that they are, immediately that you're responsible for another life. What you do with that and your reaction to that can cause positive or negative, further down the road consequences.
You can mean the best sometimes, but sometimes what your best might not
or it
be
could be
the
the
best,
opposite.
which is very interesting.
It could be the opposite. You could totally be like, fuck, I'm not ready for this, I don't want this. You could totally bounce out as well. But I still think you have that initial paternal instinct where you're responsible for a life and you realize it. What you do with that
I
is
nannied and worked in school systems. I felt my maternal instinct kicked in even without having my own child. They became kids I had to take care of.
100%.
So I get it just on a lower level.
No, I don't think there's a way to degrade it to a lower level.
I
It's
feel
different
like,
because it's not.
because everyone's like, no, parenting is different. This is, so I hear that all the time.
So then what would you say about someone who adopts? They're technically not their biological parents.
That's true.
Well, you're responsible for another life, and that life that you may or may not have birthed yourself has the cool concept of children is that their potential at all times vastly supersedes your own, and you're responsible as their parent, whether or not you birthed them. You're responsible as their parent to help guide them along their path to that potential.
Okay.
Because just think of it in terms of years. No matter what age you are, you're still that many years older than them, so their potential still will always supersede your own, essentially.
That's true, because I've even thought of because I'm not, me and Brett, we go back and forth. Do we want kids? Do we not want kids? Do I want to carry it? Do I not want to carry it? All that kind of stuff. And I've always kind of found it interesting of I kind of want to foster. So even fostering, right? You're still being a parent.
I would love to see Brett as a father, by the way. I would love to see you as a mother. Don't get me
wrong,
but at the time I spent with Brett, I'm like, fuck, man.
Can I just tell you how annoying that is, though? Can I? And I'm just gonna vent. Whatever. Everyone says to me, Brett would make such a good dad. Thank you. Not one frickin' person has said, Danny, I think you'd be an excellent mom.
I just said that.
I know you did. That's different.
You don't
but
count.
people don't
Obviously.
think sometimes, and I'm like, yeah, I know he would be a great dad, and that then also puts me. Then
Yeah.
I start spinning
50%.
out of, am I?
More, way more,
Way more. I agree with that. Way more. I agree with
way
that.
more.
I agree with that.
It's. I will. Not that I. Look, you never had to prove to me that women were strong before. No question, obviously. But watching that, holy shit,
You
women
have to go
are
through so much. So it's like
strong.
there's so many factors that go into it too. So it's like it's a scary thing to even think about sometimes. I know Brett would be a great dad. I know I would be a great mom. I've been handy
and
my
that's
whole
all you
life.
need.
I love kids. I just don't know.
Oh, this isn't a conversation on what
No,
to
I
do
know.
with it. I'm just saying,
I'm just saying it. That's where
I don't
it
think
took
you
me.
ever know.
I
don't
think
think you
you're
ever
right. No, I think you're right.
Like when we were, we technically weren't even trying for Penelope. It wasn't an oopsie. It was just sort of if it happens, great. If it doesn't,
yeah.
it doesn't. And she was an early COVID baby, right? Because you're locked up, and
That's
what
true.
are you gonna do?
Oh my God, so many COVID babies.
So many COVID babies.
So many.
But I was scared to death.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got one on the way, right? So
Yeah.
we got one on the way. We'll have our second baby in probably late November, early December. And I vividly remember when my wife told us we were pregnant again. Now I've already been a dad at that point for over a year. She told me it was like the end of March or something. Scared to death. I'm like, what am I did this already. Like I'm doing this actively.
Yeah.
Why am I terrified? Because it's such a different change, right? And this goes all the way back to what we were talking about. I can't remember if this was during the recording or before the recording. Change is hard and change is scary.
Change is so hard and scary.
but it's also guaranteed.
It's the only thing that's guaranteed.
Yes.
Guaranteed. Yeah.
It's the only thing, really.
Yeah.
Well,
100%.
death and
Taxes.
change.
We cannot.
You can avoid those as long as
Well,
as
yeah,
long
I
as
mean,
you
technically
until you
you
die,
can,
right?
Yeah, but people are gonna come after you if you avoid your taxes. But yeah.
So then it's interesting. Why don't we then take the healthy approach and say, well, if change is guaranteed, let's change our viewpoint on it. Let's start embracing it as
because most people don't see it as change is
Fear and resilience. Right back to fear and resilience.
that's what I'm saying. If you're scared or you have some sort of mental block of I'm not good enough, I'm this, I'm not that, you're not even gonna see that.
Yeah, but change is easier if you take control of it instead of let it just
Or
happen.
people think they're changing and they're not.
Oh well, yeah. Well,
There's a lot of that going on.
That's a conversation
too.
of convincing yourself. That's a conversation of convincing yourself to truth or falsification based on action. Like that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, there's a lot
Speaking
of
of conversations,
yes, we do. Need
everybody,
to,
thank you
bring
for
this
joining
to
us for our first time.
Loud
Seaman
thoughts.
and Chance, Loud Thoughts.